In 2004, a team led by the French archaeologist Jean-Denis Vigne published something odd out of Cyprus. A grave, 9,500 years old, at a village called Hierakonpolis. Inside it, a human being. And 40 centimeters away, laid out facing the same direction, a cat. Not butchered, not sacrificed, not tossed in a pit with the kitchen scraps. Arranged. Somebody standing at that funeral decided the two of them should stay together. That grave is older than the pyramids, older than writing, older than the wheel, older than every empire you could name off the top of your head. And it means the animal currently asleep on your laundry, the one you bought a $40 scratching post for, which it ignored in favor of the cardboard box the post arrived in, has been sitting inside the human story since before we were any good at farming. So here's the question nobody asks about that grave. Everyone assumes they know which one of those two was in charge. The story you were taught goes like this. About 10,000 years ago, people started storing grain. Grain pulled in mice. Mice pulled in wildcats. Humans noticed the wildcats were killing the mice, decided this was useful, and let them stay. Humans act. Cats get acted upon. Case closed. Next chapter. It's a tidy story. It's also written entirely from our side of the table. Because if you stop asking who moved in, and start asking who ended up with the better deal, 9,500 years later, with the receipts in front of you, the answer gets uncomfortable fast. Let's run it as a ledger. First, what domesticated actually means, because that word is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. In biology, domestication means a species has been reshaped by human breeding until it is genetically different from its wild ancestor in ways that suit us. Dogs are the textbook case. Tens of thousands of years of selection turned wolves into animals that differ in skull shape, in digestion, in hormone response, in how long they stay puppy-brained. Put a wolf and a beagle side by side. Those are not the same animal wearing different coats. Now do it with cats. In 2007, Carlos Driscoll and colleagues published a genetic survey in Science tracing every domestic cat on Earth back to a single wild species, Felis silvestris lybica, the Near Eastern wildcat, through 5 maternal lines. Not many lines, 5. Then in 2014, Michael Montague's team sequenced the domestic cat genome and set it against the wild cats in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. They found a short list of regions under selection. The genes cluster around fear response and stimulus-reward learning. Out of the jargon, that means cats got slightly less terrified of us, and slightly quicker to learn that we hand out food. That's it. That's the redesign. And a third study, led by Claudio Ottoni in 2017, read ancient DNA from around 200 cats spanning 9,000 years, and turned up something almost funny. The blotched tabby coat, the swirled, marbled pattern you would recognize instantly, doesn't appear in the record until the Middle Ages. Which means that for something like 8,000 years of living alongside us, humans weren't breeding cats for looks. We weren't breeding them for anything. Here's where it gets interesting. Every other domestic animal carries our fingerprints all over its body. The cat carries a smudge. So if we didn't shape it, what exactly did we do? Look at the ledger. Column 1. What the cat brought. Rodent control. And that was real work, not a courtesy. In an early farming village, the gap between a full grain store and a spoiled one was the gap between a hard winter and a famine. Cats killed the things eating the seed. Genuine value. But notice what that service cost us to obtain. No training, no breeding program, no management, no behavior modification at all. Cats hunted small mammals before we existed, and they hunt them now. We didn't create the behavior. We built a giant rodent buffet and stood near it. The cat was never performing a service. The cat was hunting, in the richest hunting ground available, and the benefit to us fell out sideways. Column 2. What we brought. Food, twice a day, forever. Shelter, heating, veterinary care that adds years of healthy life. Protection from cars, from dogs, from disease, and from all the other things that cut a feral cat's life short. Litter, toys, and furniture, chosen with the animal's preferences in mind. And in most homes today, column 1 is empty. There is no grain store. There are no mice. The founding justification for the entire arrangement quietly expired, and nobody renegotiated. Let that sit for a second. A 4-kilogram predator that contributes nothing economically has secured lifetime provision from the most resource-obsessed species on the planet. And we didn't just agree. We compete for the privilege. So how does an animal that small pull that off? It talks to you, in a language built specifically for you. Adult cats barely meow at each other. Wild adult cats almost never do. The meow, as you experience it, is not cat-to-cat communication. It is a channel pointed directly at humans. Nicholas Nicastro at Cornell University recorded and compared the calls of domestic cats and African wild cats, and found the domestic versions were shorter, higher, and rated by human listeners as more pleasant. The cats making sounds we liked were the cats that did well around us. Then there's the purr, and this is where it stops being cute. In 2009, Karen McComb at the University of Sussex published work in Current Biology on what she called the solicitation purr, the specific purr cats produce when they want something from you. Buried inside that low, calm rumble is a high-frequency cry component. Human listeners rated it as more urgent and less pleasant than an ordinary purr, and it sits in the acoustic neighborhood of an infant's cry. Think about the engineering. A demand loud enough to ignore gets the animal thrown off the bed. Silence gets it nothing. So the signal hides inside the pleasant sound. Technically comforting, quietly unbearable. You never consciously hear a cry, you just get up. The purr itself sits mostly between 25 and 150 hertz, a range measured by Elizabeth von Muggenthaler back in 2001. You will find claims online that these frequencies heal human bone. Be careful with that one. It isn't established, and this channel isn't going to pretend otherwise. What is solid is simpler and stranger. The cat delivers a continuous low-frequency vibration straight into your body, through direct contact, for exactly as long as it feels like. And then the eyes. In 2020, Tasman Humphrey and Karen McComb ran slow blink experiments with 21 cats across 14 households. Cats slow blinked back at owners, who slow blinked first, and were more willing to approach a total stranger who did it. A trust signal, in a species we describe as aloof, aimed squarely at us. Here's the part nobody tells you. None of this was planned by the cat. There is no scheme. What happened is that cats whose faces and voices pushed human buttons got fed, and cats that didn't. The buttons were already installed. Konrad Lorenz named them in 1943. Kinchin schema, the baby schema. Large eyes set low in a round skull, a small nose, a high forehead, a small body. Lorenz argued those features trigger caretaking automatically. And in 2009, Melanie Glocker's team put it in a scanner and showed infant faces activating the nucleus accumbens, the brain's reward machinery, in adults who had no children of their own. Now describe a cat's face. Round skull, enormous forward-facing eyes, small nose, compact body, a voice tuned to the frequency of a crying baby. The cat didn't invent a key. It grew into the shape of a lock we were already carrying. Which brings us to the idea that reframes the whole thing. The archaeologist Melinda Zeder has argued that domestication never happened one single way. It happened along 3 separate pathways. There's the prey pathway, where we hunted animals and then started managing the herds. There's the directed pathway, where we set out on purpose to capture and control something. And there's the commensal pathway, where the animal moves in on its own, pulled by our garbage and our grain, and selection happens with nobody deciding anything at all. The cat is the flagship of the commensal pathway. There was no moment of decision, no first domesticator. Nobody in any village on Earth ever thought, right, let's take on the wild cats. The cats walked in and stayed, and the ones best suited to staying had more kittens. That's the honest version. We didn't domesticate cats. Cats found an unlocked door. So let's reconstruct a normal morning at Hierakonpolis, around 7500 BC. You're awake before the sun, because that's when the work is. There's a store of grain that has to last until the next harvest, and it will not last if the mice get organized. Out at the edge of the settlement, a wild cat is sitting very still. You've seen it before. It doesn't come close. It doesn't want touching. It makes no sound at you. You don't feed it. You don't name it. You don't own it. You just don't throw the stone. That's the entire arrangement. 9,500 years of shared history begins with a human deciding, on a cold morning, that this particular animal wasn't worth the effort of driving off. And here's the twist. Across those 95 centuries, the cat barely changed. A little less fearful, a little faster to associate people with food, eventually some new coat patterns. That's the whole list. You changed enormously. You buy specialized food for it. You schedule your sleep around its activity. You choose furniture based on whether it will survive. You talk out loud to it in a voice you would deny using. You apologize to it. You hold an uncomfortable position on the sofa rather than disturb it, which is a fully grown primate voluntarily immobilizing itself for something that weighs about as much as a bag of sugar. And in 2019, Kristen Vitale at Oregon State University ran cats through a modified version of the attachment test designed for human infants, and found that just over 64% showed secure attachment to their owner. That result usually gets reported as heartwarming news about cats. Read it the other way. The bond is real, it runs in both directions, and only one of the two species rebuilt its entire domestic life around it. So here's the opinion, and you're welcome to fight it in the comments. Cats are not half-domesticated animals that never finish the process. Cats are the only species that took every benefit of domestication and refused to pay the price of it. But before this becomes a comedy about spoiled house cats, there's a darker chapter, and it belongs to Egypt. At Hierakonpolis, around 3600 BC, excavators including Wim van Neer found the skeleton of a cat with fractures that had healed. Broken bones don't heal in a wild animal that has to hunt to eat. Somebody kept that cat alive, fed it, and waited. It's one of the oldest pieces of physical evidence we have of a person caring for a cat rather than merely tolerating one. Now move forward roughly 3,000 years to the temple complexes at Bubastis and Saqqara, where the goddess Bastet was worshipped in cat form. Egyptologists including Salima Ikram have studied the animal mummies from those sites. Millions of cats were mummified there as votive offerings. And when the bundles are x-rayed, a great many turn out to contain young cats, killed deliberately, many with broken necks. They were bred for it. An industry of devotion, running on kittens. Same country, same animal, same reverence. One person spent months nursing a cat's broken legs. Another snapped a kitten's neck to send a message to the same goddess. Nothing about how we treat this animal has ever been simple. Worship and slaughter, a few centuries apart, in the same God's name. And the honest answer about that grave in Cyprus is that we don't know. We don't know whether that person loved the cat, owned it, feared it, or whether it was placed there as property, as a companion, or as something we no longer have a word for. Nobody wrote it down. Writing didn't exist yet. What we do know is that somebody made a choice at that funeral. And the choice was that these two should not be separated. There is one more thing worth saying, because it complicates the ledger. In 2008, Adnan Qureshi at the University of Minnesota followed a large sample of American adults over 10 years and reported lower rates of death from heart attack among cat owners. That's observational data. It shows a pattern, not a cause, and it deserves that caveat said out loud. But it hints that the exchange may be less one-sided than the receipts suggest. Something is passing back the other way. It's just quieter than money. So, no. Cats did not domesticate humans. Not in the strict biological sense. Nobody selectively bred you. But something reorganized your home, your budget, your sleep, and your posture around an animal that will never once thank you for it, and it managed that without ever agreeing to be trained. 9,500 years ago, on Cyprus, somebody arranged a grave so that a human and a cat would stay side by side. Tonight, you'll arrange your own body around a sleeping animal so that it doesn't have to move. Nobody had to teach you that one either. Tell me in the comments, what's the most expensive thing you have ever bought your cat that it completely ignored? The cardboard box answers are going to win, and we all know it.